For years, I was just a shadow in this house. But on that morning in Austin, the sun streamed through the enormous windows as if it wanted to reveal what was hidden behind so much luxury. The floor gleamed, the furniture seemed untouched, and there was a scent of lavender in the air that only served to mask the emptiness. I was sitting in a corner of the living room, silently watching the expensive suitcases lying open on the sofa. Tickets to Paris, hurried laughter, voices that passed through me without noticing. The television showed images of the Eiffel Tower, and everything in me screamed with the desire to be there too. But no one asked what I wanted. My son David walked through the house giving orders. Designer clothes, phone in hand, an impatient look on his face. He barely looked at me. I was wearing my wool sweater and a skirt that had already lived through many decades. I felt out of place, like an old painting on a glass wall. When I tried to smile at my grandchildren, they ran past, excited about the idea of seeing Europe. They didn't even notice my presence. I was part of the scenery, perhaps the most silent part. The night before, during dinner, I gathered my courage. I spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper. "I've always dreamed of seeing Paris. Maybe I could go with you." David let out a harsh laugh, the kind you laugh at something pathetic. "You're too old to travel with us, Grandma. Your place is here, taking care of the house." Those words pierced me like broken glass. His wife continued to chew. My grandchildren, silent, lowered their eyes. And I remained there, swallowing another humiliation along with the lukewarm soup on my plate. The next morning, no one spoke to me. They were too busy reviewing tickets, checking bags, calling an Uber. I stood near the window, my hands clasped in front of my body, trying to look useful, trying to be noticed. But there was no hug, not even a goodbye. The gate closed, and silence took over the house like a heavy wave. A silence that seemed to scream that I was no longer needed. Where are you watching this story from? Subscribe to the channel and tell us your city in the comments. Your presence matters too. I stood there for a few more minutes, staring at the door. Then I turned, walking slowly. The cold floor under my feet only intensified the chill that came from within. In the living room, a fallen cushion caught my attention. I picked it up and arranged it on the sofa, as if it made a difference, and I sat down, trying to take a deep breath, but the air seemed to weigh me down, as if it were made of everything I never said. David always said I should tidy up the closet in the hallway. I would put it off, but on that day, the silence was so oppressive that it pushed my steps there. The dim light of the hallway created strange shadows. When I opened the closet door, I was hit by an old smell. I started to rummage through it, not knowing exactly what I was looking for, until I found that forgotten shoebox. When I opened it, my heart stopped for a second. It was a photo of me. I was 25 years old. I was smiling, next to the car we had just bought, ready to travel with my husband. My hair was loose in the wind, my eyes shining with hope. I sat on the floor, strengthless. The photo trembled in my hands, and for the first time in a long time, I cried. I cried like someone opening a whole dam. Each tear was a piece of the woman I once was, who had disappeared without anyone noticing. There, on the cold floor of that hallway, with the smell of old paper and dust, I made a decision. It wasn't rebellion. It was liberation. I went to my room, opened the drawer where I hid some savings, counted money, years of small change carefully saved. I grabbed a small suitcase. I put in a few clothes, the photo, and a coat. On the kitchen table, I left a note. I wrote calmly, like someone saying goodbye to an old ghost. "I've gone traveling too. I don't know when I'll be back." Then I closed the door, and I left, without looking back. I never imagined that leaving home would scare me so much. It wasn't just the fear of the world outside. It was the dread of what I was leaving behind. For so many years, I lived as if my steps had to be silent, my desires small, my words measured. Since I retired from the library more than 15 years ago, everything about me seemed to have diminished. I was useful there, among books, among stories. But after my husband's death, I became a shadow who only served to care for never to be cared for. My son welcomed me into his home with sweet words, but it soon became clear that the gesture was not affection. It was an obligation disguised as charity. David was always in a hurry, ever since he was little, but there was a sweetness in him as a child, so curious, so full of questions. I wonder where I lost that boy. Maybe when he started to be ashamed of my simplicity, or maybe when his classmates laughed at my mended skirt. When I picked him up from school, he never said he loved me after he turned 12. After that, everything was demands, corrections, and that look of superiority. And yet, I stayed there, believing that one day he would see who I was. Not the maid, but the mother. The road to Santa Fe seemed endless. I took an interstate bus from the Austin bus station. A cramped seat, a man snoring beside me. But there was a strange freedom in not knowing exactly where I was going. I remember looking out the window and thinking, if I die today, at least I die in motion. And that gave me strength. Every kilometer was a thread that broke between me and that house that nullified me. My body ached, but my heart didn't. For the first time in decades, it was beating with will. The motel where I stayed was simple. A room with a double bed, clean sheets, and a window that looked out onto the desert. I placed my things on the dresser, as if I were setting up a small altar. The photo of me at 25 was the first thing to be positioned. Then, my glasses, my brush, a blouse that still smelled of the old house. And there, in that new silence, I began to breathe differently. Not like someone trying not to bother, but like someone who exists. At the reception, the young woman asked me if I was just passing through. I said yes, but inside me, something was screaming, "No, I'm coming back." I didn't know exactly to where, but I knew that the place I came from was no longer mine. I walked along the stone street past an artisan shop, saw ladies my age drinking coffee and laughing loudly. I felt envious. I felt a longing for something I had never lived. And also, for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Was there still time? I bought a small notebook. Small, with a red cover. I started to write. Scattered things, memories, sentences I wished I had said. I wrote my husband's name. I wrote David's name. I wrote my own. And I cried. I cried a lot, because I realized that for years, no one had written my name with affection. It was always Grandma, David's mother, the lady. I wanted to be Eleanor again. On the third night, David called me. His name appeared on the screen and I froze. For a second, I wanted to answer. I wanted to hear his voice, even if it was to blame me. But I hung up. Then came the messages. "Where are you? This is irresponsible. Come home now, Mom." And there was the pattern. I had left, but he still thought he had control. But something inside me had already changed. The messages continued. He accused me of being senile, said he could have me legally declared incompetent, that I needed help. And for the first time, I laughed. A sad but free laugh. Because I understood. He needed me to be weak. That way, he could be the savior, the martyr. But I was no longer weak. I was in Santa Fe. I was alive. And that was all I needed to know. The next day, I went to a small cafe. I ordered a tea and sat near the window. A man with a white beard asked me if the seat was taken. It wasn't. We talked for 2 hours. His name was Jorge, a widower too, a retired painter. We talked about books, about loneliness. When I mentioned that I used to work in a library, his eyes lit up. "So you lived among stories. How lucky you are." And I almost cried right there. Jorge took me to see a local fair. We walked slowly. I was wearing my best coat, one that David said was out of fashion. And for the first time, I felt proud to be dressed as I wanted. I bought a handmade necklace. Small. Blue. It was cheap, but it felt like a prize. A symbol. I was rebuilding who I was. Back at the motel, I sat on the bed and reread my notebook. There were already 10 pages written, pieces of me scattered in words. And I realized that for the first time, my pain was coming out. It was taking shape, and that was healing. As if writing was the bridge between the woman I was and the woman I could be. On the 6th day, the calls stopped. Silence. And this new silence was different. It wasn't the silence of indifference. It was the silence of waiting. I knew David would come. Somehow, he would come. Not out of love, but because he was losing control. And I needed to be prepared for what was coming. I started walking every day. Santa Fe has a sky that seems bigger. I would get up early, put on my old shoes, and go out. I greeted strangers, bought a coffee, wrote, and little by little, I created a routine that was all my own. And this routine gave me peace. On one of these walks, I found a community library. I went in. The smell of old books embraced me. I asked if they accepted volunteers. The young woman smiled. Always. And there, in that instant, I felt I had rediscovered an essential part of myself. I helped catalog books, organize shelves. I talked with children and the elderly. I heard stories. I told some. And I understood that I no longer needed to be tolerated in a house where I wasn't loved. I could be useful, not as a domestic helper, but as Eleanor, with my memories, my hands, my voice. I became friends with the librarian, Clara, a sweet woman, full of stories. She invited me to a book club. I accepted. I brought my red notebook, and at the end, I read an excerpt. When I finished, there were teary eyes in the room. Clara held my hand and said, "You have so much to give, Eleanor." And I believed her. I started to write more, ideas for texts, memories, even short stories. Clara suggested I create a blog. For other ladies like you. I thought, why not? I named it The Traveling Grandma. And there, something I had never imagined began. People started to read, to comment, to call me by my name. Every message I received was like a patch on my heart. Women of all ages said they saw themselves in me, that they too had been forgotten, that they wanted courage. And I, without knowing it, was offering that. Courage. With simple words. With truths that once hurt and now liberated. Then, on a warm autumn afternoon, I heard a knock on my motel room door. I looked through the peephole. It was him, David, in a suit. No smile. His face tense, his hands clenched. The moment I had feared had arrived, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready, because this time, I knew who I was. I opened the door calmly. My heart was beating fast, but my hands were steady. David stood there, like a stranger. His dark suit clashed with the golden late-afternoon light that flooded the motel corridor. He looked around with a mixture of disgust and impatience, and then faced me as if I were a problem to be solved. "Mom, what is this? What are you doing here? Come on, get your things, I've come to get you." His voice had no trace of affection, only authority, as if I were still a child who had run away from home. For a few seconds, I was silent. I looked at him closely. The smooth, treated skin, the expensive watch, the empty gaze. A successful man, but completely lost. Then, without changing my tone, I replied, "You told me I was too old to travel, David, that my place was taking care of your house, but today I understood that my place was never there." He frowned, took a step forward. "You're acting like a spoiled teenager. This is dangerous, irresponsible. You need care." And in that instant, I realized he didn't see me. He only saw the projection of what he needed to control. I took a deep breath and invited him in. He hesitated, but entered. He sat on the edge of the bed with disguised disgust. I remained standing. "You always thought I was weak, that I depended on you. And I was, for a long time. But now, I'm here, alone. And for the first time, I feel like I am myself." He laughed sarcastically. "You think this is freedom? Living in a motel room, away from family? This isn't a life." And then I spoke, slowly, letting each word carry weight. "It's not the beautiful house that makes a family, David. It's love. And that, you have denied me for years." He fell silent. For the first time, perhaps, without an, argument. He looked around as if seeing that room for the first time. My few belongings, the old photo on the table, the blue necklace hanging in the window. Everything there said, This is me now. I walked to the window and looked at the sky. I didn't come here to challenge you. I came here to find myself. And I found myself. He stood up, annoyed. Are you really going to throw everything away? I can take care of you. But you need to come back. I turned, without anger, only with a peace I had never had. I don't need you to take care of me, David. I need you to respect me. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We now continue with the video. He lowered his eyes. For the first time, I saw something break inside him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was just exhaustion. He sat down again, but now differently. Less imposing, more human. Are you really happy here? He asked, almost whispering. I smiled. I'm not happy all the time, but I'm alive. And that's enough. He didn't answer. He just ran his hands over his face, like someone trying to understand something for the first time. We were silent for long minutes. I sat in the chair near the window. He was looking at me, but now there was something different in his gaze. It wasn't pity, it was doubt. As if he were reviewing a story he thought he already knew the end of. I didn't know I was hurting you so much, he murmured. It's not about knowing, David. It's about feeling. And you, for a long time, you haven't felt anything that doesn't involve status. The sentence came out without resentment, only with pain and truth. He stood up, adjusted his jacket, but didn't leave. And now, what will you do? I looked at him firmly. I will continue. Maybe I'll stay here. Maybe I'll go further. The important thing is that every step is my own. He nodded, as if, for the first time, he wasn't trying to decide for me. If you need anything, let me know. I smiled gently. If I need to, I'll let you know. But deep down, I knew that now I might only need myself. David left slowly. He didn't slam the door, and I remained there, with a peaceful heart. The fear was gone. The guilt, too. A new sensation remained. A lightness. As if, at 72, I had just been born again. David never knocked on that door again. And honestly, I didn't expect him to. Something had changed that afternoon. Not in him, but in me. For the first time, I didn't apologize for existing. I didn't shrink. I didn't lower my eyes. I continued my routine as before, perhaps with a little more firmness in my steps and more lightness in my soul. The motel room became home for a few months. Then, with the little I had, I rented a small apartment in a retirement community in Santa Fe. A modest place, full of plants, where everyone has a story and no one is ignored. There, I began to allow myself to dream again. The afternoons were filled with small talk, hot tea, and laughter. I took painting classes. I made friends, people with deep wrinkles, but even bigger smiles. And the blog, The Traveling Grandma, grew more than I ever imagined. Women I had never met wrote to me, telling their own stories of abandonment, of rebirth. I read each message like a gift. I discovered that my previous silence was the same as that of many others, and that my voice, now, could serve as a comfort to them too. I started getting invited to reading events, even interviews on local radio stations. They always asked me, "And you, don't you miss your family?" And I would answer with sincerity, "I do. But I've learned that missing someone is different from depending on them." And so I stitched together my new life, point by point, as my grandmother used to do with her quilts. Every friend I made, every story I heard, every gesture of kindness I received, it all reminded me that it was still possible to be loved, even without carrying the title of David's mother. One day, in one of the painting classes, I painted something strange. It was an open window with a huge sky and a woman walking alone. When I finished, I realized that it was me. I showed it to Clara, my friend from the library. She smiled, moved, and said, "This painting is going on the cover of your book." I laughed. "A book?" "Yes, it's all there, in your texts. Write this book, Eleanor." And I wrote it, without rushing, without fear. Each chapter was a wound stitched with words, and when I finished, I felt whole. I launched the book simply on a sunny afternoon in the library itself. Ladies, young people, curious onlookers came, They brought flowers, words, hugs. It wasn't fame. It was something deeper. It was recognition. When I read aloud an excerpt about the loneliness I felt watching my family leave for Paris without me, I saw teary eyes in the audience, and I understood. My pain was not only mine, it was collective, and for that reason, my healing was too. Months later, I was invited to lead a support group for elderly women who felt invisible. Each meeting was a collective rebirth. We cried, we laughed, we remembered the times of being a mother, a grandmother, a woman who was forgotten, but we also celebrated the now in which we were seen, heard, valued. My life didn't turn into a fairy tale. There are still difficult days. I still miss the hugs I didn't receive, but I learned to hug myself, and that, perhaps, was the greatest gift of this journey. I relearned to like myself, with all my flaws, wrinkles, and silences. I no longer wait for them to ask for my forgiveness. I no longer wait for them to love me as I deserve, but I love myself, and that is enough. Have you ever done a gesture of kindness that changed a life? Leave a little heart if you believe that love is more powerful than any wealth. Subscribe for more stories of second chances. Comment, "Love has no price," if you also believe in human kindness. 2 years have passed since that afternoon when I looked my son in the eyes and said, wouldn't go back. And today at 74, I can say, I have never been so alive. I am here at the Grand Canyon, guiding a group of ladies from my community on an excursion we organized with great effort and joy. We wear wide-brimmed hats, sunscreen, and carry full water bottles. We walk slowly, laughing about our sore knees and the old love stories that still make us sigh. Each face here carries the marks of time, but also a light that does not fade. As I observe the immensity before me, I think of all the times I believed it was too late, that my story was already over. But life, like the landscape before me, is made of layers. Some arid, others colorful, and each one has its own value. I didn't need great fortunes, nor public recognition. I just needed to listen to myself, to respect myself, and to take one step out the door of a house where I was forgotten, and one step towards the world where I was finally seen. At the end of that afternoon, under a quiet shade, I receive something unexpected, a postcard from Paris. In the top corner, familiar handwriting. It's from David. Inside, a photo of him with his family in front of the Eiffel Tower. On the back, a simple sentence. You were right. Paris is beautiful. I hope one day we can see it together. There is no apology, no promises, but there is recognition. And that is already a lot. I hold the card carefully, as one holds a wounded bird. I smile, not with the hope of a return, but with gratitude for having come this far. I put the card in my backpack and look back at the horizon. The wind hits my face, and for a moment, I smell the scent of freedom. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that as long as I can walk, write, smile, I will keep moving forward. The group starts to gather for the final photo. Clara adjusts the tripod. Jorge makes silly jokes, as always. I stand in the center, holding my cane with one hand, and with the other, a small sign where it's written, "It's never too late to start over." Click. The photo is taken. A moment captured. A life transformed. At night, I sit down to write another post for the blog. I write about the Grand Canyon, about the postcard, about how life is made of surprises that only arrive when we have the courage to leave the zone of invisibility. I receive messages from readers in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, women who also want to travel, write, love again. I answer them one by one, because I know the value of being heard. And so, I go on, living, one page at a time, one walk at a time, not to prove something to the world, but to honor that 25-year-old Eleanor from the old photograph, and to ensure that, until the very end, I am the author of my own story.